Hello, this is EJK. Today, in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how innovation deals with Ultralisks in the TvZ matchup. We're going to be taking a look at his games between Elazer and his game versus Nerchio. They show very promising macro games against Ultralisks when the chitinous plating upgrade is already done. So what innovation ends up doing is he hits a timing after the Ultralisk upgrade, not before. And the Ultralisk upgrade has fully kicked in, and he is still able to miraculously win fights with his bio composition. The reason why I'm not starting this replay from the beginning is because all of this stuff isn't very important. We're going to be focusing on some broad concepts so that regardless of your build, and I'm sure everyone watching tends to do different builds. There isn't a single standard norm of a build that you can really do in StarCraft. This will give you the opportunity to make these changes into your own build rather than trying to copy Innovation's build and doing the same thing hoping it works against Ultralisks. Rather than copying Innovation's build, I will be pointing out the important things that Innovation does, like losing that medevac full of units. He's doing that because he knows he's so good. He's like, Elazer, I know that you're a good foreigner, so I'm gonna make this game interesting and lose that medevac. What was I saying? Something about, oh yeah, the broad general concepts of what should be going through your mind when you see Ultralisks instead of the, oh shit, I guess I'm dead thoughts that tends to run through everyone's head currently, because Ultralisks are a very big pain in the butt to deal with, but mostly because we don't know how to deal with them just yet. Innovation has done a lot of self-reflection, and along with being able to talk to Zerg players like Sue and Dark, both on SKT, that's probably where the idea to come up with these kinds of unit compositions came from or originated from, and that can be very valuable in speeding up the quote-unquote metagame and to progress the strategies that are available in the StarCraft 2 game. That is why the metagame constantly shifts, because things get figured out eventually. A lot of damage has been done. Innovation's in an okay spot. One thing that I'd like to point out, actually, it's just a minor detail. Doesn't really have anything to do with the video. So the supply is very heavily in Elazer's favor before the engagement, but Innovation is able to do a somewhat miraculous looking hold here. Elazer has 4 Ravagers, 38 Roaches, 66 drones. Innovation only has 2 tanks and 23 Marines and a single Marauder to deal with this entire scary Zerg army. It's 1-1 versus 0-0. So, does the 1-1 finish? I think it finishes. Basically, though, Innovation is able to hold this attack very well because Elazer senses blood in the water and he tries to kill Innovation. And what ends up happening is Innovation has superb siege tank placement, first of all. Having this siege tank on the high ground is pivotal so it doesn't get picked off by these Roaches and Ravagers. So Elazer goes in, he sees the army looks pretty small, so he's like, I'm gonna kill that. Then he decides, okay, well, Innovation went up into the main, I can't really go up there. And Innovation's already sacked his third, he's given up, not even trying to defend it. And so Elazer tries to go for the third base, and he ends up getting a lot of SCV kills, but these siege tanks on the high ground, this siege tank especially, has been shelling out so much damage, it was able to weaken up Elazer's army, and the Marines were able to clean everything up because the Zerg army wasn't gaining any health, whereas the Marines were being healed instantly by medevacs. So, just some key factors important small subtle details that allowed Innovation to hold an otherwise very scary looking push. Now Elazer is still in a great position, mind us. He has a fourth base up and running. He's saturated with his fourth gas. He has infestors on the way. He has his roaches. His 2-2 is very far ahead of Innovation's. His Ultralisk Cavern is halfway complete. Innovation's 2-2 isn't even nearly done yet. So, an important decision that Innovation decides to make in this game is recognizing that his 2-2 is was delayed because of the push, because of the opener. For whatever reason happened in the game, Innovation's 2-2 is delayed, and he will no longer be able to go for a 2-2 timing push. So, since he is not going to be pushing, doing a specific timing push, he is instead going to take a fourth base so that his next timing around the time that 3-3 hits is going to be a lot stronger. Now, Innovation's able to get some good amount of damage done because Elazer doesn't. He took the weird fourth base. Elazer could have very easily taken this as his fourth base. The siege tanks wouldn't have been able to do this kind of tricky positioning, and he wouldn't have lost this base, essentially. So Elazer's on 3 bases now. Now, you might find yourself in a situation like this where you're like, oh yeah, Zerg's on 3 bases. There's no way he can win now because it's 3 base versus 3 base. But then Ultralisks come out, and they get the chitinous plating upgrade, and before you know it, you're on the run. Your opponent has a scary army, and you don't know what is going on. You don't know how to deal with it. So, this is about the time that Elazer is shaping up his army. He's getting he's getting a pretty beefy army there. So, fast forward, he's got 5 Ultralisks out and 24 Roaches. What we see on Innovation's production tab is he's starting to make Marauders, he's making his usual staple of Marines, but more importantly, he's starting Thor production. To understand where this Thor production comes from, we're going to have to back up a little bit in the game, and we're going to have to go to Innovation's point of view, because we want to identify A, why is he building the Thors, and B, what triggered him to start building the Thors. So let's just zip through this, and we're going to be looking for a specific thing when the Thors start. The Thors start now. So, now that we know when the Thors are starting, we have to figure out why Innovation is making the not why Innovation is making the Thors, but what prompted Innovation to start making Thors. So if we take a look at the army, we see that Innovation has about 6 siege tanks and 7 medevacs, and now he's adding Thors. So a logical explanation that Innovation decided to start making Thors here would be because he has enough siege tanks. If he started to get more siege tanks, he would also need more medevacs. The medevacs would have to be more controlled over the siege tanks. The siege tanks could also be more. They also get harder to deal with when you end up having like 8 to 10 medevac siege tanks all sieged up. It becomes very hard to pick them back up. And not only that, but if you just have siege tanks, your opponent can do a lot of. They can just chew through the Bioforce and then get right on top of your siege tanks, and you can be in very big trouble. So, what the Thors do to Innovation's army. So, he has 7 tanks, 5 Marauders, and 28 Marines, and he's adding Marauders and Thors. So, what these units do is the Marauders do extra damage against both the Roaches in Elazer's army and the Ultralisks. The Thors, more importantly, tank for both the Roaches, the Ravagers, and for the Ultralisks as well. So what the Thors end up doing is they provide a nice buffer in between Innovation's siege tanks, Innovation's siege tanks, and Innovation's bio army with the Thors. So the Thors, with their 400 HP, they have more HP than anything. Anything. And it isn't helping matters that Elazer has his Ultralisks are not upgraded at all. So these Ultralisks only doing 35 damage. Not too scary to a Thor that has 400 HP. So the reason why Innovation is adding these thors onto his army is because he recognizes that past a certain number of siege tanks, the effectiveness of siege tanks will become not so great, and the thors will offer more utility than adding in more bio units instead of the siege tanks. So like the decision is we're not going to add any more siege tanks past, let's say, 7. So what do we want to add instead? Do we want to add ghosts? Do we want to add thors? Or do we want to add more bio units? Or do we want to go for an air switch? Those are all of our options that we have. And a general rule of thumb is you do not want to change your you do not want to change what you're doing as much as possible. I guess an easier way to put it, I don't know why I said it that way. It just overcomplicates things. An easier way to put it is you want to you want to take the change that offers as little change to what you're doing as possible. So, in this case, producing more bio units or so in this case we would rule out the usage of liberators because that introduces a sky unit. You would need another starport to start producing liberators, and you would also need a ghost academy to start producing ghosts as well, and you also need a lot of ghosts to be effective against ultras in high numbers. And the Zerg can outproduce your the Zerg can outproduce you ultras versus ghosts unless you have a very significant lead. So what the thors how the thors fit into this play is excuse me, my throat just got really dry there for a second. So what the thors do is they you don't need to add on any buildings to build a Thor. You don't need a Ghost Academy, you don't need an additional starport, you don't need a fusion core, you also don't need any additional upgrades either. Innovation was getting the vehicle attack upgrades for the tanks, and the Thors are going to benefit from them as well. So all in all, Thors seem like a decent choice. And as we see them in the battle, against this type of composition, a Roach Ravager Ultra composition, Innovation has 7 tanks, he has a handful of Thors, and he has a handful of Bioforces. And what ends up happening in this battle is that the Bioforce and the Thors work really well together at dealing a lot of DPS to either kill the Roaches before they get in range, if they're in front, or if the Ultra's in front, shred them down before the Roaches can start to jump on top of you and push you back. And Innovation ends up taking a good fight there because Elazer ends up attacking into a concave. Innovation very smartly, let me just actually go back to it. Why am I going forward? This is a replay. I like replays because they offer a lot more depth of analysis. So if we take a look at Innovation's positioning, he chose a very good time to take the fight. Having his siege tanks over here away from his army means that if Elazer wanted to try to attack these siege tanks, he would have to split a part of his army off to deal with it, and Innovation can simply lift up, go over here, even go over there, or just move his tanks because they're mobile now because of the medevacs. And Elazer also decides to attack into this choke with his very, very big army. And so not only has Innovation set up a very nice flank with these siege tanks, and now Elazer's army attention is split in two. Elazer also fought into a very giant concave that Innovation has set up in this very small choke area. So Elazer fought in a very poor position, and as a result, lost a lot of supply. He's reproducing 24 30 supply, and he still has 6 more supply left. Innovation barely lost any units in that battle, and this allows Innovation to push forward also with impunity from these Ultralisks and this Ultralisk Remax, because his army is strong enough when it has a slight advantage like this that you can just bulldoze over the Zerg army. And we see that happening right now. Very good siege tank positioning by Innovation, having his siege tank split behind this ledge in half so that Elazer is forced to either attack into this direction or attack into this direction, splitting his army up a lot and making Innovation's army more effective. And these thors doing a lot of damage DPS wise, but also absorbing a lot of damage as well. And Innovation is able to completely crush this army that has with ultralisks that have chitinous plating, and he's able to take the win. So the important thing to note here, like a brief summary, is Innovation builds or adds in thors after he reaches a healthy siege tank count of about 7 siege tanks. He's at 2 now because he unsieged all of them. And he starts to add in thors and more marauders to deal with the ultralisks with chitinous plating and with the ravagers. Now, there are different kinds of unit compositions that the Zerg player can do, and that is why we're going to be taking a look at Nerchio versus Innovation. Nerchio chooses to tech up to ultralisks in a slightly different way than Elazer did. Elazer chose to stay on Roach Ravager and then get some infestors and then tech into Ultralisks. Nerchio decides to utilize Ling Ravager Infestor and tech into Ultralisks. And by having the Lings as a part of his army, he is able to utilize the melee upgrade a lot faster. So when his Ultralisks come out, they're going to be even tougher than Elazer's were. So we're just watching this from Nerchio's point of view because we just want to focus on Nerchio's game plan. It's how can I be as safe as possible to maintain 4 base economy so that I can produce a healthy amount of Ultralisks. We're going to ignore this total failure of an opening by Innovation. Actually, it's not much of a failure because although Innovation is going 3 racks before Command Center, he does have the power of a mule, and Nerchio's natural base was not mining at all. So Innovation essentially has the same income as Nerchio when we take a look at here. And what happens is after these initial drones get produced, and Nerchio knows that it's the Reapers, so like Nerchio just produced a bunch of drones. Oh, let me just go back a little bit more, because like before that drone count, Nerchio was on so little drone count. So like Innovation's actually ahead in economy. So the way that Nerchio's opening, Innovation is actually ahead. And although Innovation doesn't do any direct damage, he does a lot of indirect damage to the economy by forcing Nerchio to produce a lot of units. And because Innovation did not cut any SCVs to build these barracks, and he's adding his natural command center fairly fast. We see Nerchio trying to squeeze out a few more drones after these roaches, a very good time to do it. Now, the income is fairly even because of the mule, but Innovation has twice as much gas mining compared to Nerchio. So Innovation's gaining a small tech advantage, and he's going to be able to utilize his gas a bit faster than Nerchio. Nerchio's income spikes up now because he is safe. He's finally droning up to where he should be. But before, like, even though the economy was, or the worker count was fairly even, Nerchio spiked up there because he saturated his natural base, whereas Innovation was not completely saturated yet, and he didn't have a second mule coming in. But all in all, a relatively even game because of how Nerchio opened very safe with the pool, and I believe he got speed as well. Oh, he didn't get speed. But the pool on the early Roach Warren, and making all of these roaches as well, 7 roaches, and delaying his third base, whereas Innovation's third base is going up fairly fast. Innovation was able to do enough indirect damage to make this game, I wouldn't say favor him, but to make it at the very least an even game going into the mid game. So, looking at Nerchio's point of view, we see a nice Overlord spread. He's going for a very fast lair. He's droning up because he knows he's held everything. Very fast infestation pit. As soon as his lair finishes, he gets his infestation pit. And now he starts zergling speed as well. And he's getting the double upgrades, melee and carapace, so his intention is to get Ultralisks out and make an Ultralisk timing as strong as possible as well. Taking this very early 4th base. And he's fairly safe because on the other side of the map, Innovation's 2 medevacs aren't even out yet. Nerchio has a healthy drone count now. He has a lot of units to also defend against this 4th base as well. We're actually going to X4 this because we have to come back and look at Innovation's point of view very quickly as well. 4th base does not get cancelled. Creep spread's kind of weak because Nerchio, in favor of getting a higher drone count and getting his 4th base up faster, the corner that Nerchio cut was his creep spread. He has 2 active creep tumors, and I don't believe very many of them died. Whereas, like, a more macro-oriented Zerg like Snoot might have like 4 or 5 creep tumors over here. Nerchio only has 1. So we see adrenal glands being researched ASAP as well as the chitinous plating. Nerchio is very, very safe, and he's essentially gotten the army that he wanted, which is the Ultras with chitinous plating and the Zerglings with adrenal upgrade. So he was able to get in a good spot, and Innovation hasn't, besides doing light drop harass, clearing the creep, Innovation hasn't actually touched Nerchio at all. So now chitinous plating is done. These Ultralisks are 2-2. Adrenal is done as well. So it's pretty safe to say that Nerchio was able to tech up to his Ultralisk based army about as comfortably as he wanted to. Now, taking a look at Innovation's point of view, we're going to see Innovation not even break a sweat when he isn't able to do much harass. With double upgrades, combat shields, and stim. Oh, excuse me. Had to yawn there. The 1-1's slowly heading along. He's not rushing his medevacs out. Now he's just starting siege tanks because he invested so much into the double upgrades and the medevacs. And so this is kind of the very first push that comes across the map. It's a poke with 1-1 being done, combat shields and stim. The important thing that Innovation sees here is that Nerchio has a lot of speedlings added onto his army, and he is also at 1-1 as well. So the big difference between Nerchio and Elazer's play is that Nerchio adds in Zerglings into his mid-game army composition, where Elazer relies more primarily on Roaches and Ravagers and chooses not to make the Zerglings or Adrenal Glands early on, both having their pros and cons. I'm just pointing them out so that we are aware of what Innovation sees and what makes him react slightly differently to this kind of Ultralisk based army. So we see on the production tab, Innovation only has 3 tanks. It's such a puny number. So the magic number before switching into thors in the game on Dusk Towers, not on the game on Dusk Towers, is 7. So Innovation has the double factory. Again, he had it in the last game as well, and I think it's very necessary. And he always chooses to get Tech Lab as well. He's not relying on Widow Mines at all. They can be too easily countered by the Ravagers, and he's not using Hellbats either because they're not so great against Ultralisks. His entire, I guess, like, production is geared toward the inevitable Ultralisks that are about to come out. So just chugging along, Innovation just poking, trying to get damage wherever he can. Nice snipe offs, but he's still not by any means ahead. And this is where you know that when you see a Terran player win against a Zerg and the Zerg player was ahead, you know that what the Terran player doing is pretty good. Or at least the basis of what the Terran is basing his theory off of. So, Innovation now has that magical 7 tank count that we saw against Elazer, but he's choosing to build more siege tanks. And earlier on, I pointed out that with his first medevac timing with combat shields in 1-1, Innovation had scouted that the Zerglings had double melee up, or had the melee upgrade, and he had a lot of Nerchio had a lot of speedlings, and instead did not use Rogue's Ravager. So, what ended up happening was the small change that Innovation did against Nerchio's slightly different army, which is comprised more of Ravagers, Ravagers, and a few number of Roaches and Infestors, but the really fast to really rush out the Ultralisks. So what Innovation did is he just continues to produce tanks against this kind of an army. So the reason behind not making additional thors is because if you make thors against a heavy army, what are the thors going to do when they're on attack move and the lings are rushing forward at you? They're just going to attack the lings and their shots will be wasted. Adding the thors in against the ravagers and the roaches was a smart idea because the thors couldn't be surrounded and each of their volleys, each of their shots, their slow, heavy DPS shots, was hitting something meaningful, like an Ultralisk, a Roach, or a Ravager. In this situation, the Lings are going to clump up a lot more than Ravagers and Roaches will, and so Innovation decides to rely on a higher siege tank count in the later stages of the game to deal with the Ultralisks. And Innovation doesn't even have 3-3 on the way either, so he's by no means ahead in upgrades either. This is just he's building a superior unit composition, which is the thing that we want to see against Ultralisks, because then you know you can build this unit composition and look at Innovation. He's not pressured at all. He doesn't have a fourth base. He's just slowly building an army. He has some medevacs been doing harassment, just light harassment, picking off things here and there. But Innovation is not panicking at all. He's just like, the more siege tanks I have in my army, the better it'll crush your army. And Nerchio tried to poke in, but Innovation was in a defensive position. And now Innovation decides to move out. He scans ahead. This scan is important because he needs to know if his opponent's army is there so that he knows where to place his siege tanks. If Nerchio's army was there, Innovation would have to place his siege tanks and slowly leapfrog over, because we see Innovation has no vision over here. So he scans, he sees no army, he knows it's safe to move forward. He starts to rally all of his units forward as well. Scanning at an clear creep. He sees the army now, and so he immediately puts his tanks down. He doesn't get greedy with positioning either. If his tanks were put too far close to the Zerg army, then the Zerg army would be on top of the tanks and killing them before Innovation is able to get a volley off, which is not what you want. So, taking a look at this engagement and these army compositions, Nerchio has 5 Ultras with the chitinous plating upgrade. He has 68 Zerglings, 9 Roaches, and 3 Ravagers. So this is a very heavy Ling Ultra army. And Innovation has gone up to a very high siege tank count to deal with these Ultralisks. And this timing is based more around a maxed out timing, so it's an army timing, not a timing where you're attacking as an upgrade finishes. So, taking a look at this battle, as long as the siege tanks are a healthy distance away and you can scan and see that, and they're sieged up as well, Innovation is gonna win this fight no matter what. And just to prove what I said, like, he's gonna win no matter what, he places these 4 siege tanks just right in front of Nerchio's army to bait Nerchio into these siege tanks. Like, the only reason Innovation can do this is because he has so many siege tanks, and he has 6 siege tanks already sieged up. If he only had like 2 or 3 siege tanks sieged up and then he did this, he would have gotten crushed. But the fact that he has 6 siege tanks sieged up already allows him to do this, get fungled, lose all those siege tanks, and still end up winning this fight very easily. Because these siege tanks ended up just blasting away everything. And we see here the siege tanks are holding their ground. Only the Ultralisks were left, and because such a big chunk of army was in the Lings and they evaporated so quickly to the siege tanks, there were like 60 some Lings and they pretty much vanished in the blink of an eye to the siege tank fire. 71 Lings right here, and let's see how fast they disappear. 62, 50, 40-ish, 30, 20. The Lings just dropped to the siege tank fire. Oh, and they do 38. Siege tanks do 38 damage too. Lings have 35 health. So siege tanks actually with +1 attack, they one-shot Lings. Because they do 38 damage. Lings have 35 HP and they have 2 armor, so that's 37 damage. So yeah, siege tanks with +1 one-shot Lings with +2 attack. That's pretty cool. So that's why Innovation decides to stay on the siege tank count against the Lings, because he can one-shot all of those units. And Nerchio's army evaporates. Innovation is able to take a very good positioning while Nerchio is remaxing. And now Nerchio's 4th base is compromised. Nerchio doesn't have the army. He was trying to transition into the Greater Spire, which he just didn't have enough time for because of this relentless attack. He's forced to make units. Everything dies, and Innovation takes the win. So the most important thing is that these +1 tanks one-shot Lings. I did not know that. They will still one-shot Lings. They will still one-shot Lings at +3 armor too. Now that I think about it, because only 3 armor, that's 38, and tanks do 38 with +1 attack. That's pretty interesting. So Innovation's able to win the game fairly easily from here, and I hope that gave a better understanding of how Innovation was able to deal with the Ultralisks armies and make it seem almost easy to deal with the Ultralisks, and his reasoning for using the tanks and the thors in his unit compositions as well. I hope you guys can apply this to your games, and hopefully you won't have any more nightmares of Ultralisks eating away at your army. This brings an end to this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any problems that you're struggling with, just leave a comment below, and I can make a video that can potentially help what you are struggling in as soon as possible. Until then, cheers guys, and stay warm out there, or in there, in your room while you're gaming. Ha!